Alright, my name is Hiram Shelton, and this is my video on special population inmates in Kentucky. So I'm going to start out by saying Kentucky is not the best at treating special population inmates. I had to do some extensive research to find some answers on some of these. But let's start with juveniles. In Kentucky, you have to be 18 years old to get sent to prison. But they do have prisons for juveniles. So they have 8 running facilities that are specifically for juveniles in Kentucky right now. And that is mainly where they're putting juveniles. In cases of infectious diseases, right now most of the time they just put them in like a solitary confinement to keep them away from everyone else. But in cases where they are especially infectious, they can get sent to medical facilities, and they can get some actual serious help. But a lot of times they are just kind of put in solitary confinement. When it comes to how transgender people are treated and where they are imprisoned, I actually found this cool website here, and it explains the story of one transgender man, meaning he grew up as a she and now is transitioned to a man. And well, they explain their experience, but in doing so, it explains actually how they do things in Kentucky, because this person happened to live in Kentucky. So they were held in an all-women's prison, and then once Kentucky allowed them to start having testosterone injections, then they were actually just kept in isolation, and it's still being in debate as to whether they what to do. But for now, they're mostly in a solitary confinement because of the harshness of the crime they committed. But in most cases, what they're trying to say is that most people that are transgender would go to like a general prison where it's like a co-ed type of prison, and be kept in places like that. In terms of mentally ill, this is difficult. In Kentucky, this is a long process because basically, if you've already gone through court and everything and then been accepted as getting to prison based that you were cognitively able to be in prison, then it takes a lot in Kentucky to be able to prove some type of mentally ill disorder where you would go to a psychiatric place. But it is possible. Most of the time, though, they are just kind of kept in prison, even if they are suffering. In terms of sex offenders and violent offenders violent offenders in Kentucky often have their own prisons for violent offenders. There are prisons that hold multiple types, and many of them are violent. But in Kentucky, mainly, they have prisons specifically for violent offenders because it is such a common occurrence. And lastly, sexual offenders or sex offenses in Kentucky, they go to, I had to find some cool sources here I'll share with you, but basically they go to what is called a VP something. Let me see here. They go to a VPU, which is a vulnerable prisoner unit. So for sex offenders, they have the option to go to a VPU. Most of them choose not to because it does single them out, and there's a lot more sexual offenses that happen in VPUs, but it is an option. Many of them sometimes do feel safer in VPUs because of the harshness of other prisoners. I'm not a prisoner, but if it were up to me, I'd probably go to a VPU looking at the pros and cons of this article here. But like, uh, based on how you're treated and how um, the guards treat you and things, it's best not to be a sex offender in the first place. But VPUs are better. It is, again, it is a process in Kentucky to get accepted into the VPU program. And so Kentucky isn't necessarily the most fast in terms of helping special population inmates, but they do have programs, they do have ways to do it. And so, yeah, it was really interesting to learn about.